When Vivian Blackwood pushed the divorce papers in front of me, her young secretary, the one she'd promoted not long ago, was leaning casually against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips that he didn't even try to hide. His gaze was like someone sizing up an old piece of furniture about to be tossed to the curb, a mixture of contempt now that the dust had settled and an impatient urge to get it over with. The overhead light in the living room was harsh and white, casting sharp, boardroom-like angles on Vivian's well-maintained face. Pressed under her fingertips wasn't just a few sheets of paper, but a certificate that could buy out my entire 2-year marriage, a check for $5 million. "Sign it?" Vivian's voice was flat, as if she were finalizing a routine contract clause. Her finger tapped lightly on the check, making a soft, crisp sound. "Give him his due. This money is enough for you to go back to that small town of yours and live comfortably for several lifetimes." She didn't even look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the agreement, as if confirming an insignificant number. The air held the cold, lingering scent of her expensive perfume, mixed with the deliberately ostentatious cologne of a young man radiating from the secretary, a cocktail of scents that declared victory. I leaned back into the sofa, my gaze sliding from Vivian's indifferent profile to the undisguised smugness on the young man's face by the door, finally settling back on the agreement and the check. $5 million, 2 years, a monthly allowance in the tens of thousands, a pure return on investment. Not bad. I even managed a small smile so faint that probably only I noticed it. "Pen," I said. Vivian seemed surprised by my straightforwardness. Her tapping finger paused for a second and she glanced up at me. A flicker of something like good. Your place crossed her eyes before they returned to that business-like indifference. She lifted her chin toward the door. The secretary immediately straightened up, an obsequious smile plastered on his face. He walked over in a few quick steps, pulled a Montblanc pen from the inner pocket of his expensive suit and held it out to me. The gesture had a hint of charity. I took it without looking at him. The cool metal of the pen met my fingertips. I flipped open the agreement, going straight to the last page. The signature line was blank, waiting for me to put my name down and end this 2-year-long farce that was a marriage in name but an investment in reality. Vivian's name was already there, signed with a flamboyant flourish that spoke of her usual need for control. The nib scratched against the paper with a soft whisper. I signed my name quickly, steadily. With the final stroke, it was done. The dust had settled. Vivian seemed to let out a breath, the tight line of her jaw relaxing slightly. She picked up the agreement, confirmed the signature, and then pushed it toward me along with the check. I folded the check and casually stuffed it into my pants pocket. The paper was light, almost weightless, yet it was a heavy proclamation of a newfound freedom. "Big V," the secretary immediately cooed, his arm wrapping around Vivian's waist with practiced ease. His voice was sickly sweet. "All taken care of? Are you tired? I booked your favorite Japanese restaurant for tonight." Vivian didn't push him away. She just gave a faint M&M, letting him half embrace her as they walked upstairs. She didn't spare me another glance. Her high heels clicked on the polished marble staircase, a crisp, hollow echo that grew more distant with each step, leading her away from this home she had never truly inhabited. I sat motionless on the sofa, listening to their footsteps ascend, a faint murmur of flirtation drifting down, followed by the soft click of the master bedroom door closing. The vast living room was suddenly empty, save for me and the cold, expensive silence. The overhead light was still blindingly bright, casting an unreal, detached sheen on the imported Italian furniture and the abstract paintings on the walls. This place had never felt like a home, more like a luxury hotel suite. And I was just a long-term tenant whose lease was up. I stood up. Without turning on any lights, I used the faint glow of the city's neon signs filtering through the window to navigate my way to my guest room on the first floor. My bag was already packed, sitting at the foot of the bed, a massive hiking backpack. Inside were just a few changes of clothes I wore often, a couple of books, a laptop, and an old worn wallet I'd had for years. The things that were truly mine were pitifully few. The designer clothes, watches, and accessories that Vivian had someone deliver regularly, I hadn't touched any of them. They lay quietly in the walk-in closet, belonging to this space, not to me. I unzipped the innermost pocket of the backpack and tucked the folded check inside, placing it next to a yellowed photograph. It was a picture of my parents, the Clarks, standing in front of our old house, their smiles gentle. The cold touch of the check against the warmth of the photo created a strange contrast. I shouldered the bag and opened the door. The living room was still empty and silent. I gave this gilded cage one last look, feeling not a shred of attachment, and turned to leave. The heavy security door clicked shut behind me with a dull thud, sealing off that world completely. A biting late autumn wind hit my face, scattering the last traces of lingering perfume. I took a deep breath of the cold, crisp air, and it felt like it cleared my lungs. I pulled out my phone. The car I'd hailed with a ride-sharing app arrived quickly. The driver was a quiet, middle-aged man. Seeing my large backpack, he asked casually, "Catching a train, young man?" "Yeah." I got into the back seat, placing the backpack beside me. "To the high-speed train station." The car merged into the streets, still bustling with traffic late at night. Outside the window, the glittering city skyline flew backward. The silhouettes of skyscrapers looked like slumbering beasts in the darkness. This was Vivian's world, a world of ambition, speed, and cold, hard rules. I had briefly stood on its edge, like an observer. My phone screen lit up. It was a message from Vivian's young secretary, Ethan. I opened it. There was only a photo. It was him and Vivian in a dimly lit booth at some bar. His arm was around her shoulder, and he was making a tacky 5 sign at the camera, his face a mask of undisguised gloating and provocation. Below it was a line of text, "Thanks for making this happen. Sincere Big 5 and I are going to be very happy. You just go enjoy your retirement." The photo was dark, but the relaxed, even indulgent smile on Vivian's face was clearly visible. It was an expression I had never seen on her. With me, she had always been like someone fulfilling a serious contractual obligation, efficient, precise, and devoid of extraneous emotion. I looked at the photo without any anger or jealousy, just a sense of calm now that everything was settled. I even found it a little amusing. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment. I didn't reply, nor did I delete the conversation. Instead, I opened my contacts, found the name Vivian Blackwood, long pressed it, and tapped delete. The action was clean, without a hint of hesitation. After doing all that, I shoved my phone back in my pocket, rested my head against the cool glass of the window, and closed my eyes. The world went quiet, leaving only the monotonous hum of the wheels on the road, like a hypnotic drum beat. The high-speed train station was brightly lit, still full of people coming and going late at night. Red characters scrolled continuously across the massive electronic display. I picked up my ticket and walked into the waiting hall with my backpack. The air was a mix of greasy smells from fast food joints, the scent of disinfectant, and the exhausted aura of countless travelers. A woman's voice, crisp and clear, announced train information over the PA system. I found a seat in a corner and placed my bag at my feet. My phone vibrated in my pocket again. I pulled it out. It was a text alert from my bank. It notified me that a massive transfer of $5 million had just been deposited into my personal account. The memo line had only 2 cold words: compensation. Staring at that astonishingly long string of numbers, a strange feeling began to rise within me. It wasn't elation, but the relief of a heavy burden finally being lifted. This check, along with the allowance Vivian had deposited monthly for the past 2 years, and the returns from the prudent investments I'd made with the compensation money my parents had left me, all of it formed my ticket to freedom. They lay there silently, like solid cornerstones, paving a road to the future I had long since planned. Ding dong, attention passengers, train GXX to Greendale is now boarding. The announcement sounded. I stood up, shouldered my heavy backpack, and merged into the crowd heading for the boarding gate. I passed through the turnstile, walked down the long platform tunnel, and finally stepped into the train car. I found my window seat. Outside, the platform was brightly lit, and people hurried by, pulling their suitcases. The train began to move slowly, accelerating smoothly. The platform lights receded quickly, shrinking, eventually replaced by the boundless darkness, and the sparse lights of the distant city. The window reflected my own blurry image, calm, even relaxed with relief. I placed the backpack on my lap, unzipped it, and once again confirmed that the check and my parents' photo were there. My fingertips brushed the edge of the photo, a barely perceptible warmth spreading from it. Then, from a side pocket of the backpack, I took out something else, a palm-sized, soft leather notebook, its edges worn and frayed. The dark brown cover was plain, without any design. I opened it, Inside was the neat, clear handwriting of my parents. It wasn't a diary, but more like an extremely simple yet incredibly precise guide to life. The first half was a record of family income and expenses, accurate to 2 decimal places. Every penny earned, every penny spent, even the price of a pound of greens was noted down. The second half contained practical and, one might say, shrewdly insightful investment tips and tricks they had accumulated over the years. How to tell if a project was reliable, how to read people by looking at their eyes, their hands, the way they talked about their goals, whether it was empty talk or real substance. How to stay calm during market fluctuations, how to calculate the balance point between risk and reward. The language was plain, with no lofty theories, but filled with the street-smart wisdom of survival. They were no financial tycoons, just 2 ordinary people who had worked diligently in a small town their entire lives. This notebook was their most humble attempt to leave me, their only son, a means of survival. It was the starting point and foundation for all my investments. Without it, there would have been no money to sponsor Victoria, and certainly not the crucial angel investment I had made in Vivian. My fingers gently traced the familiar handwriting, those simple proverbs about reading people, feeling as if they still held my parents' warmth. Vivian, Victoria, 2 vastly different faces flashed through my mind. Vivian, back then, had sat across from me, looking haggard, yet her eyes held embers that refused to die in the ashes of her failure. She spoke of her downfall with a terrifying calm. No complaints, only review and analysis. And Victoria? My memory snapped back many years. It was a sweltering September afternoon, the sun a blinding white. In the little diner run by Mrs. Shaw behind the university, an old ceiling fan stirred the thick, heavy air in vain. I had just finished my first day of freshman classes and was sitting at my usual corner table. My calculus textbook and notebook were open, the tip of my pen scratching on the paper, but my mind was drifting. After my parents passed away, this small diner and the compensation money in my bank account had become my entire world. The glass door was pushed open, letting in a gust of even hotter air. A figure walked in hesitantly. I instinctively looked up. It was a girl. She wasn't tall, and her frame was so thin she looked like she could be blown over by the breeze from the door. She wore a faded old t-shirt, equally faded jeans, and a pair of white canvas shoes that had been scrubbed clean. Her hair was tied in a simple ponytail. A few stray strands at her temples damp with sweat and stuck to her skin. Her face was pale, her lips dry, but her eyes were exceptionally bright, holding a cautious stubbornness and an ill-concealed anxiety. She stood by the door, her gaze quickly scanning the small diner, seemingly looking for something. Finally, her eyes landed on Mrs. Shaw, who was wiping plates behind the counter. She took a deep breath, as if mustering all her courage, and then walked over. Her steps were light, almost timid. "Ma'am?" Her voice was quiet, with the soft cadence of a southern accent, but clear. "Excuse me, are you still hiring?" As she asked, her fingers tightly gripped the hem of her faded t-shirt, her knuckles turning white from the force. Her gaze was lowered, not daring to meet Mrs. Shaw's eyes. Mrs. Shaw stopped what she was doing, looked up, and sized her up. There were no other customers in the diner, only the monotonous hum of the fan. "We are," Mrs. Shaw said, her voice carrying the briskness of a local. "But the work's not easy. Waiting tables, washing dishes, wiping tables. When it gets busy, you won't have a moment's rest. The pay is hourly, not high, but you get a free dinner. Can you handle it?" The girl's head bobbed up and down like a chicken pecking at grain. The light of hope flared in her bright eyes. "Yes, I can. Ma'am, I can do anything. I'm not afraid of hard work." Her tone was so eager it was almost desperate. "You look young, little lady. Just started college?" Mrs. Shaw put down her rag and leaned against the counter. "Yes, I'm a freshman," the girl answered softly, her head slightly bowed again. "What about your family? Do they know you're working? School just started." The girl was silent for a moment, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt even tighter, her knuckles frighteningly white. After a few seconds, she said in an even lower, softer voice, "My tuition, I earned it myself. During the summer, my travel fare, too." She didn't say whether her family approved, but the answer was obvious. Mrs. Shaw sighed, her expression softening. She was about to say something when I closed my textbook, stood up, and walked over. Auntie Martha, I said as I reached the counter, my eyes on the frail-looking girl. Sensing my approach, she seemed to tense up even more, her head bowing lower, leaving me with only a taut, uneasy profile. "Oh, sincere," Mrs. Shaw said, looking at me. "Take a look." I nodded and asked the girl directly, "What's your major? What's your name?" She looked up as if startled, her bright eyes meeting mine. They held surprise, nervousness, and a faint, almost imperceptible defensiveness. "Computer science. Victoria Stone." Her voice was very soft, but her enunciation was clear. "Victoria Stone," I repeated the name, without any particular emotion. "The work here isn't easy, but Auntie Martha is a good person. Come by when you're free after class. You'll be paid on time, and you'll get plenty to eat." My tone was flat, as if stating the most ordinary fact. Victoria froze, her bright eyes wide with disbelief. She looked at me, then at Mrs. Shaw, seemingly unable to understand why it was suddenly settled. "Mrs. Shaw immediately broke into a smile and sealed the deal. "All right, girl. You're hired. Can you start today? It's quiet right now. You can get to know the place." An immense wave of joy washed over Victoria's face. A rush of color flooded her pale cheeks, and her eyes shone with an incredible light. She nodded eagerly. "Yes, I can. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, senior." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a pure, almost overflowing gratitude. I just grunted in acknowledgement, said nothing more, and returned to my corner seat to reopen my calculus book. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mrs. Shaw showing Victoria around, telling her where the rags were, the dish soap, how to stack the plates. Victoria listened with extreme concentration, nodding constantly, her movements filled with a careful reverence, as if she had been granted a magnificent gift. Outside, the cicadas buzzed loudly, and the old fan continued its monotonous drone. My pen returned to the paper, calculating complex formulas. But my heart felt a little more settled than before. This investment seemed low risk. The return would probably be seeing a hard-working person's life become a little less difficult. The slight rocking of the train pulled me back to the present. Outside the window, blurry fields and the lights of villages sped by. I put away the notebook that held my past and tucked it back into the depths of my backpack. My body sank into the soft seat, and the fatigue of the long journey finally washed over me. My eyelids grew heavier and heavier. Before I drifted off, my last thought was, almost there. Soon. To that place with just a few tile-roofed houses and a small courtyard where I could plant some vegetables and go fishing. The clatter of wheels on the track went on for I don't know how long, until a clear female voice from the PA system pierced through my drowsy state. "Our next stop is Greendale Station. Passengers alighting at Greendale, please prepare to disembark." Greendale. The two words were like a magic spell, instantly banishing all fatigue. I shot my eyes open and sat up straight. Outside, the sky was the grayish white of a late autumn dawn. The morning light had yet to fully tear through the thick clouds. The outline of an old-fashioned platform emerged from the morning mist, the two large red words Greendale on the station sign standing out starkly against the gray-white background. Even the air seemed different, carrying the clean scent of soil and plants, a world away from the mix of exhaust fumes and concrete in the big city. I shouldered my heavy backpack and followed the sparse trickle of disembarking passengers out of the car. A cold wind hit my face, damp and chilly, but invigorating. Greendale Station was small, the platform old, the facilities simple, with only a handful of staff. Outside the exit was a small plaza where a few beat-up old cabs waited for fares. The drivers, bundled in thick coats, stood with their hands in their pockets, their gazes casually sizing up the arrivals. "Sir, heading to Riverbend Village?" I walked toward the nearest cab. The driver was an old man with graying hair. He looked me over. Probably, seeing my big backpack, he pegged me as an outsider, but my accent had local roots. He nodded and quoted a price. $20. Deal. I pulled open the door and got in. The cab smelled of cheap tobacco and engine oil, and the leather on the seats was cracked. The engine sputtered to life, belching a cloud of black smoke, and the car rattled away from the station plaza, turning onto a bumpy county road. On both sides of the road were harvested fields exposing the yellowish-brown earth. In the distance were rolling hills, the trees displaying the vibrant colors of late autumn, a tapestry of red, yellow, and green, like a watercolor painting bleeding into the morning mist. The air was cold and clean, and a breath of it filled my lungs with the faint tang of soil and the sweet scent of grass. Occasionally, we passed a small village where I could see smoke curling up from the chimneys of early risers, punctuated by the sound of barking dogs and crowing roosters. A long-lost sense of peace slowly seeped into my bones. The alienation and coldness of the past 2 years in that massive city, in that luxurious apartment, felt like an invisible shell being blown away piece by piece by this country wind. The cab bumped along for nearly an hour before stopping at a fork in the road. "This is Riverbend. The road in is too narrow for the car," the old man said, pointing to a smaller dirt track ahead. I paid him and shouldered my bag. I stepped onto the familiar yet strange dirt road. On both sides were the stubble of harvested rice paddies, with stubborn weeds on the ridges still holding beads of frost. After walking for about 15 minutes, my feet sinking into the soft earth, I rounded a small pond, and the outline of a few tile-roofed houses finally became clear in the morning mist. A low stone wall, a mottled wooden gate left ajar. When I pushed it open, the hinges let out a long, familiar groan, as if greeting their long-lost master. The small courtyard was empty, with some rotting farm tools piled in a corner, and the ground scattered with dead leaves. The 3 tile-roofed houses facing the gate had some broken tiles on the roof, and the windows were covered in a thick layer of dust, reflecting the gray-white color of the sky. This was the old house my parents had left me. It stood there silently, bearing the marks of time, but also a heavy sense of stability that belonged to one's roots. I put down my backpack and stood in the middle of the courtyard, looking around. The old persimmon tree in the corner was still there, its leaves all gone, leaving only a few bright red persimmons hanging stubbornly from the branches like little lanterns. The iron handle of the hand pump well under the tree was covered in rust. A warmth that was almost painful surged in my heart. I was back. I was really back. The following days felt like they were in slow motion. Life became simple, tangible, filled with the scent of soil and sunshine. The first thing was to clean. The broom swept across the leaf-strewn, dusty ground, raising a cloud of choking dust. I drew water from the well and wiped the dusty window panes and furniture again and again. When the sunlight streamed back into the main room, the whole house seemed to come alive, exuding an old but clean smell. The plaster was peeling off the walls in some places, revealing the yellow mud beneath. The roof leaked in a few spots. I bought some roofing felt and tiles, borrowed a ladder, and clumsily climbed up to patch it. I got blisters on my hands and my back ached, but looking at the repaired roof, my heart was filled with a solid sense of satisfaction. Cleaning the yard was an even bigger project. The weeds were almost knee-high. I bought a hoe and spent several days clearing them, turning over the compacted soil. My neighbor, Mrs. Dawson, saw me working alone and enthusiastically brought over some vegetable seedlings, scallions, garlic sprouts, a few young bok choy, and a small packet of radish seeds. "Sincere, it's good you're back. It's good you're back." Mrs. Dawson's voice was loud and cheerful, her wrinkled face beaming with a simple, honest smile. "This house has been empty for so long it's finally got some life in it. Planting vegetables is a good idea. You can eat them without worrying if you need any help. Just let Auntie Daisy know. Thank you, Auntie Daisy." I took the seedlings and seeds, a warmth spreading through me. Following Mrs. Dawson's advice, I created a small vegetable patch in a sunny corner of the yard. I learned to level the soil, dig shallow furrows, and carefully plant the seedlings, then water them. Watching those tender green shoots stand tall in the late autumn sun, a strange joy bloomed in my heart. So this is what it feels like to let life take root and grow. Days slipped by like this. I was woken by birdsong outside my window, not an alarm clock. After a simple breakfast, I would sometimes go to the vegetable patch to check on things, pull some weeds, or water the plants. Other times I'd move a small stool into the yard, bask in the sun, read a book, or do nothing at all, just watch the clouds drift by. In the afternoon, I might take a simple fishing rod to the small river behind the village and sit there for hours. The river was shallow, the fish small, and catching anything was a matter of luck, but the quiet anticipation itself was enough. The $5 million check from Vivian had long been cashed. That, along with the money she had deposited monthly and the returns from my parents' compensation fund, had become strings of silent numbers in my bank account. They were vast yet quiet, no longer requiring my effort to manage, only a periodic check of the stable investment reports. They were the solid foundation for my current peaceful life, the confidence that allowed me to be completely idle. I even started to calculate. My daily expenses were negligible. I grew my own vegetables and occasionally bought some rice, flour, meat, and eggs, water and electricity bills. The biggest expense was probably coal for heating in the winter. The interest alone from the money in my account was enough for me to live like this for several lifetimes. This realization brought a deep, almost lazy sense of security. Occasionally people would show up. Usually they were distant relatives or acquaintances of my parents. They came with a mixture of curiosity and probing, asking in roundabout ways why I'd made it big in the city but suddenly came back, or hinting about whether I had any spare cash or any good opportunities to share. I would always smile, offer them a cup of coarse tea, and say casually, "What fortune? I couldn't make it in the big city. Came back to farm a bit for some peace and quiet." Then I'd change the subject, asking about this year's harvest or which family's kid got into college. Seeing that they couldn't get anything out of me, the eagerness in their eyes would slowly fade, and they would eventually leave, embarrassed. The courtyard gate would close, shutting out those prying eyes, and the small yard would return to its tranquility. This peace was like a warm cocoon, enveloping me. Time seemed to have lost its measure, flowing slowly with the rising and setting of the sun, the withering and growing of plants. I thought life would continue like this, like the gentle river in front of my house, flowing silently onward, until the end, until that evening. The setting sun was a molten gold, setting the western sky ablaze. I had just finished watering the vegetable patch and was squatting by the well, washing my hands. The late autumn well water was bone-chillingly cold, making me shiver. Suddenly, the roar of an engine approached from outside the gate, brutally tearing through the village's tranquility. The sound was wild, aggressive, carrying a sense of modern speed and power completely at odds with this rural setting. It screeched to a halt right outside my mottled wooden gate. Then, a loud bang. It wasn't a knock, but a solid kick. The force was so great that the old wooden gate shook violently, its hinges groaning in protest, and years of accumulated dust rained down from the door panels. I shot to my feet, forgetting to even shake the water from my hands, and stared at the gate in disbelief. Who could it be? A neighbor? Impossible. Mrs. Dawson and the others would call out from a distance. The utility guy? Even less likely. Before I could walk over, the weathered wooden gate, after another heavier bang, was actually kicked open. The gate slammed against the stone wall behind it, bounced back, and hung crookedly in the frame, looking like it might fall apart at any moment. A figure, wrapped in a strong smell of alcohol, swept in like a whirlwind, nearly getting hit by the rebounding gate. The last rays of the setting sun fell on her. She was tall, dressed in a well-tailored, high-quality cream-colored trench coat over a matching cashmere sweater. Her long hair was slightly curled, dyed a fashionable dark chestnut. Her makeup was exquisite. Even in the twilight you could see her features were meticulously defined. But right now her beautiful, aggressive face was flushed, her eyes hazy yet sharp, as if veiled in a shimmer of water, but also burning with two flames. She was clutching a designer handbag, but it was held carelessly, swinging with her unsteady steps. The strong smell of alcohol mixed with a cold, expensive perfume rushed toward me. I froze, the blood in my veins seeming to solidify in that moment. My mind went blank for a second before I managed to squeeze out two words. Victoria? The Victoria before me was almost impossible to reconcile with the memory of the thin girl in the faded t-shirt, carefully wiping tables in the diner, or the later graduate student in a white lab coat, her eyes focused and calm. Time had left its mark on her with heavy, bold strokes, forging a dazzling brilliance and an intimidating presence. The only familiar thing was the flame in her eyes, that same stubborn, almost burning fire, only now it was more intense, more complex and inscrutable. She steadied herself, squinting her drunken yet exceptionally bright eyes, and looked me up and down. Her gaze swept over my mud-splattered old jacket, the dirt-caked canvas shoes on my feet, and finally rested on my face. Her eyes were like hooks, scraping over my skin inch by inch. "Heh!" She suddenly laughed, her voice hoarse from alcohol and carrying an indescribable sharpness. "Sincere, Clark? So it really is you." She advanced toward me, her expensive high heels digging into the uneven dirt ground, but she paid it no mind. She staggered a few steps closer, the strong smell of alcohol practically on my face. "You're good at hiding, aren't you?" Made me search high and low. She was too close. the aggressive scent of high-end perfume and alcohol overwhelming. I subconsciously took a half step back, my brow furrowing. "Victoria, you're drunk. How did you find this place?" My internal alarm bells were screaming. Riverbend Village was remote. How did she find it so precisely? How did I find it? Victoria took another step forward, her heel digging a small pit in the dirt. She didn't care, instead lifting her chin with a confrontational air. "Have you forgotten Auntie Martha? Forgotten who tipped you off back then, told you I was getting recommended for grad school, then for my PhD so you could hurry up and deal with this troublesome problem?" Her voice suddenly rose, thick with sarcasm and years of pent-up resentment. "You think deleting me on a messaging app and selling off that dump of a diner would make you disappear off the face of the earth? Sincere, you underestimate me, and you underestimate how long someone you invested in, then threw away like trash, can hold a grudge." Her accusations were like cold needles, piercing the peace I had carefully maintained. Auntie Martha, the kind diner owner from back then. I had indeed asked her to let me know if there was any significant news about Victoria during her PhD studies. I had sensed the way Victoria looked at me was changing, that her gratitude was mixed with something far heavier than I could bear. I didn't want to become a shackle or a crutch in her life. I never thought Mrs. Shaw would remember all this time, let alone that Victoria would track me down all the way here using clues from her. "Victoria, what's past is—" I tried to speak to calm her down, but she cut me off sharply. "What's past is past." Victoria was like a lit powder keg, her voice suddenly shrill, the moisture in her eyes welling up. "You think you can erase everything with a simple, 'what's past is past'? Do you have any idea what it was like after you sent that message? 'You deserve a better future, thanks for helping with my thesis,' and then deleted me. Your phone was disconnected, the diner was sold, you just vanished. I stood there like an idiot, holding the thesis I'd perfected for you, in front of that empty diner. Do you have any idea how I felt?" "Huh?" Her chest heaved, a button on her trench coat popping open from her agitated movements. The golden light of the sunset fell on her face, illuminating the moisture at the corner of her eye that she stubbornly refused to let fall. Beneath the anger was a deep-seated hurt, like an old wound being brutally torn open. Faced with her torrential questioning, I was at a loss for words. Cutting ties back then was my misguided attempt at doing what was best for her, not wanting her to be tied down to a deadbeat like me out of gratitude or something else. I truly hadn't considered her feelings, or rather, I had deliberately ignored them. "You what?" Victoria gave me no chance to explain. It was as if years of pent-up emotions had finally found an outlet, and fueled by the alcohol, she let it all pour out. "Sincere, Clark, you're a complete and utter bastard, a selfish jerk. You help people just for your own little thrill of investment, to watch someone's life change because of you, and then you get to gracefully exit satisfied and hide away to enjoy your damn freedom. Did you ever think about the person you helped? Did you ever consider if they needed your kind of benevolence?" She grew more agitated as she spoke, her voice trembling with a sob, her body swaying from the violent emotions. Her beautiful eyes were locked on me, the fire within them threatening to scorch me. "Victoria, calm down." Seeing her teetering, I instinctively reached out to steady her. "You're drunk, let's go inside." The moment my hand touched her arm, she reacted as if electrocuted, violently flinging my hand away. The force was immense, fueled by a reckless energy. "Don't touch me," she screamed. And using the momentum of pushing me away, she lunged at me with complete abandon. Caught off guard, I staggered back, my back slamming hard against the cold stone edge of the well behind me. A dull pain shot through me, and she, like a furious and desperate little animal, pressed herself against me, her hands grabbing the collar of my jacket, her alcohol-laced breath hot on my neck and jaw. "Run?" Her voice was right next to my ear, seething, filled with a near-maniacal obsession and a thick, inconsolable grief. "You were pretty quick to run back then, weren't you? My usefulness was all wrung out after I finished your thesis, so you deleted me and took off. Sincere, life doesn't work that way." Her body was pressed tightly against mine, radiating a startling heat and a soft touch. The mix of alcohol and perfume completely enveloped me. I tried to push her away, but the moment my hands touched her shoulders, she clung to me like a vine, even tighter. "What are you doing?" I was pinned against the well, unable to move, my voice turning grim. "What am I doing?" Victoria lifted her head, looking at me with hazy, drunken eyes. Her exquisite face was inches from mine, her red lips curving into a tipsy, mischievous arc. But deep within her eyes, Complex emotions I couldn't decipher churned anger, hurt, and a desperate, all-or-nothing resolve. Collecting a debt before, the words were out, her hand yanking my collar pulled down sharply. At the same time, she stood on her toes, and her scalding, alcohol-drenched lips crashed onto mine. Clumsy and brutal, it wasn't a kiss. It was more like an outburst, a branding, a domineering declaration. Our teeth collided, and it hurt. The potent smell of alcohol instantly invaded my senses. My mind went buzz, completely blank. My body instinctively fought back, trying to push her off, but she was wrapped around me like an octopus, her strength astonishing, fueled by a reckless desperation. In the chaos, my fending hand seemed to brush against the soft curve of her waist under her coat, drawing a muffled whimper from her, which only made her press against me harder. Her kiss had no technique, only a savage plundering and an air of desperate finality. The last ray of sunset sank below the horizon. The courtyard plunged into darkness, with only the dim yellow light from the main room casting a small blurry glow by the door. The sound of our ragged breathing, the rustle of clothing, and Victoria's muffled drunken sobs echoed in the silent courtyard. The cold stone of the well was at my back, the woman's hot, soft body and scorching breath in front of me, a collision of fire and ice. The last shred of my reason told me I had to stop this absurd charade immediately. I took a deep breath and with all my strength grabbed her shoulders and shoved her away from me. Victoria stumbled back several steps, her high heels slipping in the mud, nearly causing her to fall. She steadied herself by grabbing the old persimmon tree, panting heavily, her chest rising and falling dramatically. Her lips were swollen and red, her hair was a mess, sticking to her sweaty cheeks, and her eyes were hazy and unfocused, as if she had exhausted all her energy, or perhaps was stunned by her own actions. The courtyard was filled only with the sound of our heavy breathing, echoing in the gathering dusk. The air was thick with the smell of alcohol, a charged atmosphere, and a cold, awkward tension. "Victoria, you—" I wiped my lips. They seemed to retain the taste of her lipstick and a faint metallic tang of blood. My voice was tight with suppressed anger and helplessness. "Are you insane?" She leaned against the persimmon tree, lifted her head, and looked at me with unfocused eyes. After a few seconds, without any warning, her body went limp and she slid down the trunk, collapsing in a heap on the cold ground. Her head lolled to the side. She had completely passed out. Watching Victoria curled up and unconscious under the persimmon tree, I stood frozen. The chill from the well seemed to have seeped into my bones. The night wind rustled the dead leaves on the ground, sending them skittering past her disheveled hair. The strong smell of alcohol filled the cold air. This was a nightmare. Leave her here? The late autumn dew was enough to make someone seriously ill. Bring her inside? The whole situation was bizarre and promised endless trouble. I rubbed my throbbing temples and finally sighed in resignation. I bent down, carefully avoiding her expensive-looking trench coat, slipped one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, and lifted her into my arms. She was heavier than I expected. Her soft body radiated a surprising heat. Her head rested limply against my shoulder, her warm, boozy breath tickling my neck. I carried her as steadily as I could, stepping over scattered dead branches and into the main room. The room was lit by a single dim, incandescent bulb. As I laid her on my wooden bed with its old cotton quilt, she let out an unconscious whimper and frowned, as if uncomfortable. I straightened up, looking at her passed-out form. Her exquisite makeup was smudged under the dim light, her brow furrowed, her long lashes casting restless shadows on her eyelids. Her lips were still swollen and red. Stripped of her waking aggression and expensive armor, she now looked somewhat fragile, with a heart-wrenching familiarity, like the girl from years ago in the diner, who had turned pale with fear and helplessness after breaking a plate. The thought was fleeting, quickly replaced by a deeper sense of helplessness. Trouble. Big trouble. I pulled a clean, thin blanket from the side and haphazardly draped it over her. I walked to the other end of the room, dragged the old rattan chair to the doorway, and sat down. The night chill poured in through the open doorway. I lit a cigarette. Through the swirling smoke, I watched the sleeping figure on the bed, feeling as if the path ahead was shrouded in chaos. It was going to be a long night. Victoria slept deeply, occasionally murmuring something unintelligible, her tone sounding plaintive. I leaned back in the rattan chair, smoking one cigarette after another, my mind a jumbled mess. Memories I had deliberately sealed away came flooding back because of her arrival. The way she had run to the diner, giddy with excitement, to tell me she had been accepted into the graduate program, the focused profile of her face as she stayed up all night helping me revise the thesis that I barely cared about but needed to graduate, and finally, the self-righteous sense of relief I felt after sending that message and blocking all her contacts. Looking back now, it all seemed so foolish and cruel. Just before dawn, the ashtray was overflowing with cigarette butts. I leaned back in the chair, my consciousness blurring. In a state between sleep and wakefulness, I thought I heard a slight movement from the bed. I snapped my eyes open. The sky was beginning to lighten, a grayish-white light filtering through the tattered paper on the windows. Victoria had sat up at some point, the thin blanket having slipped down to her waist. She was looking down, one hand rubbing her temple, clearly suffering from a hangover headache. Her other hand, however, was hesitantly, carefully, pulling down the collar of her cashmere sweater, peering inside. Sensing my gaze, she looked up, and our eyes met. The air instantly froze. Her expression shifted from the initial grogginess of a hangover to confusion as she registered her surroundings, and then to a complex mix of shock, mortification, and disbelief as she saw me, exhausted and smoking in the rattan chair by the door. Memories seemed to be flooding back. The color of her face changed rapidly from pale to flushed red, finally settling on an expression of utter bewilderment. Her eyes darted down to her own clothes, which were intact but wrinkled, then shot back down to the inside of her collar. Then, as if she'd been burned, she quickly pulled her collar back up, covering whatever she might have seen. When her beautiful eyes looked back at me, they were blazing with a furious fire ready to erupt. Sincere Clark, her voice was hoarse from the hangover but sharp with accusation, a violated rage. Her finger trembled as she pointed toward her collarbone even though it was completely covered. What did you do to me? You hurt me. The early morning light, carrying the distinct chill of late autumn, filtered through the dusty window lattice, casting mottled patches of light on the uneven mud floor of the main room. The air was still thick with the lingering smell of last night's alcohol and an indescribable, almost tangible awkwardness. Victoria's cry of "you hurt me" landed like a red-hot brand in the silent air. Her fingers clutched the collar of her cashmere sweater, so tightly that her knuckles turned white, as if she were trying to strangle the soft fabric. Her eyes, now filled with rage and humiliation, were fixed on me, the emotions swirling within them too complex to read. There was the shock of violation, the fog of a hangover, and something deeper, something she herself might not have recognized. I leaned back in the rattan chair. The exhaustion of a sleepless night and the sting of nicotine made my temples throb. Looking at her like this, the memory of her pinning me against the well, the painful clash of our teeth, the cloying sweetness of her lipstick mixed with the taste of blood, all came rushing back. I took a long drag from my cigarette, let the harsh smoke fill my lungs, and then slowly exhaled, trying to quell my rising irritation. "What did I do to you?" My voice was raspy from smoking, laced with an almost absurd calmness. "Dr. Stone, perhaps you should try to recall who it was last night who got blind drunk, kicked down my door, and then launched herself at me like a human cannonball, biting and clawing." My gaze met her burning anger without flinching, even deliberately sweeping over her expensive, now mud-stained and wrinkled trench coat. If I had really wanted to do something, my tone took on a deliberate coolness and mockery. "Do you think you'd be sitting here right now, fully clothed, just feeling hurt?" I emphasized the words "feeling hurt," my gaze pointedly flicking toward the collar she was guarding so fiercely. Victoria's face instantly turned a deeper shade of red, the blush spreading all the way down her neck. She was clearly trying to piece together fragments of the previous night, but the alcohol had erased most of the details. My blunt words were like a splash of cold water, causing the fire in her eyes to waver, replaced by a deeper, more complex shame. She instinctively glanced down at her collar again, as if to confirm something, then shot her head back up, her gaze still defiant, but her confidence was clearly shaken. "Well, you still shouldn't have." She tried to regain her momentum, but her voice was weak and dry from the hangover. "I was drunk. Can you hold someone accountable for what they say or do when they're drunk? You just let me do that?" She seemed to be blaming her own aggressive actions on my inaction. "Let you?" I almost laughed in exasperation. I stubbed out my cigarette and stood up. The combination of a sleepless night and being falsely accused made my tone hard. "Victoria, Last night you were as strong as a young bull. I couldn't push you off if I hadn't seen you were passed out and worried you'd freeze to death in the yard. Why would I have bothered carrying you in here? I was more worried you'd puke on my bed. I pointed to the shabby wooden bed and the thin blanket covering her. And now you wake up and turn the tables on me? My words, fired off like a machine gun, left her speechless. She opened her mouth to argue but found she had nothing to say. Hazy fragments of the night before seemed to be assembling in her mind, the loud crash of the door being kicked in, the cold stone of the well, the clean, soapy scent of the man mixed with a faint hint of tobacco, and her own desperate, angry, biting attack. Her face cycled through shades of red and white, her eyes darting around. Finally, she turned her head away in frustration, refusing to look at me, and just rubbed her throbbing temples, muttering, "My head hurts so much." The atmosphere settled into a strange stalemate. She sat on my bed like a sulking child who'd done something wrong but was too proud to admit it. I leaned against the door frame, looking at the pathetically crooked gate in the yard, mentally calculating the trouble and expense of getting it fixed. After a long while, she finally spoke, her voice much lower, tinged with a reluctant resignation. "Is there any water?" I sighed, accepting my fate, and went to the kitchen. I boiled some water in the old aluminum kettle, found a relatively clean enamel mug, filled it halfway with warm water, and stirred in a spoonful of honey from a glass jar. I carried the mug back and handed it to her. "Drink this, it'll help with the hangover." Victoria glanced at me, hesitated for a moment, but took it. Her fingertips touched the warm side of the mug, and she held it, taking small sips of the sweet water. The warm liquid seemed to soothe her frayed nerves, but her brow remained furrowed, whether from the headache or a troubled mind I couldn't tell. "How did you know I was here?" I sat back down in the rattan chair, breaking the silence. This was what I most wanted to know. Riverbend Village was too remote. A brilliant, up-and-coming scientist like her, whose time was as precious as gold, why would she waste so much energy to track me down for revenge? Victoria held the mug, her fingers unconsciously tracing its rim, her eyelashes lowered, hiding the emotion in her eyes. "I told you, Auntie Martha." Her voice was flat. "After you disappeared, I went to see her. She wouldn't tell me anything at first, just said you'd told her to let me focus on my studies and not to look for you. Later," she paused as if choosing her words carefully, "I graduated, got a job, and I guess I've had some success. I went to see her again, spent a long time talking with her, and she finally relented. She said your hometown was in Greendale County, but she didn't know the exact village. She only remembered you mentioning Riverbend once, saying there was a small river behind the village." She looked up at me, her expression complex. "There's more than one Riverbend village in Greendale. I checked maps, asked around. It took a lot of time. This month I had a conference for a project in the neighboring state. After it ended, I rented a car, navigated to Greendale, and started asking, village by village." Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were describing the most ordinary thing, but the persistence and effort involved were palpable. Was it worth it? I looked at her, voicing the question in my mind. "Just to settle a score with me for deleting you as a contact. Victoria, you're Dr. Stone now. You have a brilliant future, millions in prize money. Why waste your time on someone who's long been out of your life?" My voice held genuine confusion. Cutting ties was meant to prevent me from being a burden or a fixation for her. I thought time would wash everything away. "I'll be the judge of whether it was worth it." Victoria's voice suddenly shot up, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. The calm she had just found was gone. She put the mug down with a clatter, her eyes burning as she stared at me. "Sincere, do you think that because you gave me a little money back then, a little so-called help, that you gave me a chance, and then you got to make a clean exit, I should be eternally grateful, obediently follow the better future you planned for me, and from then on, treat you as a symbol of gratitude and never see you again?" Her words came out in a rush, filled with suppressed agitation. "You're wrong. Dead wrong. You have no idea what your actions meant to me back then. It wasn't just about the money, it was the first time I felt that the world wasn't a cold, heartless place, that it wasn't just about being used and exploited, that someone would extend a hand with no expectation of return. You pulled me out of the mud, gave me a chance to breathe, to look up at the sky, and then what? Just when I wanted to get closer to you, to tell you that I could be a source of support for you too, you threw a bucket of cold water on me and disappeared without a word. Who are you to decide what's good for me? Who are you to assume that your benevolence is what I wanted? Her eyes were red again, her voice trembling with a sob, but this time she didn't let the tears fall. She just stared at me defiantly, her chest heaving. Her gaze held accusation, hurt, and a deep-seated trust and reliance that had been betrayed years ago. I was pinned in place by her barrage of questions, utterly speechless. What I had self-righteously considered doing what's best for her, she described as a condescending act of charity and a cruel abandonment. For the first time, I clearly understood how deep a wound my seemingly decisive break had cut in her heart. The room fell silent again, filled only with the sound of Victoria's slightly ragged breathing. Outside, the sky had fully brightened. The faint sounds of early rising villagers and crowing roosters drifted in. After a long time, so long that the light in the room had become bright and clear, illuminating the tear tracks on her stubborn face, she suddenly took a deep breath, as if having made a decision. She wiped her face messily with her sleeve, then threw off the blanket and got out of bed. She was still a bit unsteady from the hangover, but she quickly stood up straight. Without looking at me, she walked straight to the door. Her exquisite high heels left clear prints in the dirt floor. She went to the old persimmon tree, bent down to pick up the expensive handbag she had dropped there last night, and dusted it off. I thought she was leaving. A strange sense of relief washed over me, even though the broken gate was a stark reminder that my troubles were far from over. However, Victoria, handbag in tow, did not head for the gate. Instead, she turned around and, with an air of unshakable purpose, walked straight into the small room next to the main one, my bedroom and study. "Hey, you!" I instinctively tried to stop her. Victoria completely ignored me. She stood at the door of the small room and glanced inside. A narrower single bed, an old desk piled with books and clutter, my hiking backpack in the corner. The room was small, even cramped. She frowned, clearly displeased with the environment. Then she did something that left me utterly dumbfounded. She tossed her handbag onto the desk with a thud. Then she started unbuttoning her trench coat. "Victoria, what are you doing?" I rushed over, my voice cracking. She had already unbuttoned the coat with swift efficiency. She took off the expensive cream-colored coat, casually draped it over the back of the desk chair, revealing the equally high-quality cashmere sweater underneath. Then, as if she were in her own home, she started looking around, seemingly searching for something. "Do you have a clean towel? And a toothbrush?" She finally looked at me, her tone as natural as if she were at a hotel reception. "I stink of alcohol, it's disgusting. I need to take a shower." As she spoke, she even lifted her sleeve to her nose and wrinkled her nose in disgust. I was completely baffled. "A shower? You want a shower here?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Victoria, get this straight, this is my house and—" I pointed to the broken gate. "You broke the door, pack your things, I'll find someone to take you back to town, or to the city, find a hotel." "The door's broken?" Victoria raised an eyebrow as if just noticing. She walked to the main room's entrance, glanced at the pathetic-looking gate and said nonchalantly, "Oh, I guess I kicked it a bit too hard. How much? I'll pay for it." As she said this, she actually pulled out a bulging, luxury-brand long wallet from the handbag on the desk. Judging by its thickness, it was stuffed with cash. She held the wallet and looked at me, her eyes conveying a sense of any problem that can be solved with money is not a problem, and maybe even a hint of defiance. "Name your price." "This isn't about money." I felt my temples begin to throb again, a fire of frustration rising within me. "Victoria, what the hell are you trying to do? Wasn't last night's drunken rampage enough? This is the countryside, it's not your lab or a five-star hotel. There's no water heater, you have to boil water and use a bucket to shower. And this is the only bedroom in the house. Oh, boil water? Then I'll trouble you to do that." Victoria seemed to have completely missed the latter part of my tirade, latching onto the phrase, "boil water." She said, as if to herself, "Where's the bucket?" "Oh, is that the red plastic one in the yard? Looks okay." With that, she actually started walking toward the yard, heading straight for the red plastic bucket in the corner that I used for watering the vegetables. I watched, utterly stupefied, as she, in her $1,000 sweater and high heels, squatted down to pick up the mud-caked bucket. The scene was so absurd it took my breath away. I rushed over and snatched the bucket from her hand. "Victoria," I practically growled through clenched teeth, "can you stop this? I give up. I was wrong back then. I shouldn't have deleted you and disappeared. I apologize. I sincerely apologize." I'm sorry. Is that enough? Can you please just stop torturing me? Take your wallet, get in your rental car, and go do whatever it is you do, Victoria, having been relieved of the bucket, didn't get angry. Instead, she straightened up and dusted off her non-existent dirt from her hands. She looked at my exasperated face, and a faint yet meaningful smile touched her lips. There was no triumph in it, but rather the sly satisfaction of a successful scheme. Apologize? She tilted her head slightly, as if examining an interesting specimen. Sincere, do you really think I came all this way and kicked down your door just to hear a flimsy "I'm sorry"? She took a step closer. The lingering smell of the hangover had faded, replaced by her own unique scent, clean yet resilient. Her gaze was sharp and direct, as if it could pierce through my carefully constructed calm. Let me tell you something. Her voice was low but carried an undeniable force. Last night, whether you admit it or not, it happened. Her fingertip through the cashmere lightly tapped her collarbone, the very spot she had accused me of hurting this morning. This is the proof. Her tone was resolute. When I, Victoria Stone, do something, I see it through to the end. And more importantly, I take responsibility. She locked her eyes on mine, enunciating each word with perfect clarity. You invested in me back then. Now it's my turn to take responsibility for you. Responsibility for me? I was so stunned by her gangster logic that I couldn't find a single word to retort. As for a place to stay, she glanced around the dilapidated courtyard and old house, her eyes landing on the crooked gate. The door's broken. Perfect. Saves me the trouble of kicking it in next time she turned back to me. A gentle smile on her face, but the light in her eyes was like that of a hawk locking onto its prey. This place of yours, I quite like it. Quiet. Good for recuperating. And she paused, her gaze sweeping over the small patch of newly sprouted vegetables in the corner, then returning to my face, her smile deepening with a determined certainty. I quit my job. Victoria's voice was quiet, even carrying a hint of post-victory ease, but it was like a stone dropped into stagnant water, sending ripples of utter absurdity crashing through my mind. She quit her job, the Dr. Stone who was part of a major national research project, who held millions in prize money, whose future was dazzlingly bright. She quit to come to my rundown hovel with no water heater and declare she was going to take responsibility for me. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I stood frozen, the muddy red plastic bucket still in my hand, a wave of incredulous heat rushing to my head, my ears buzzing. What did you say? My voice was as dry as sandpaper. Victoria, get a grip, don't joke like that. Do you know how many people would kill for your job? I'm perfectly clear-headed. Victoria's expression was unusually calm, even carrying a sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. She looked at me, the earlier aggression in her eyes gone, replaced by an almost stubborn clarity. Before last night, I might have hesitated a little. But when I kicked down that door and saw you standing here, her gaze swept over the desolate yet budding yard, fell on my mud-splattered old jacket and finally settled on my eyes. I knew I came to the right place, and I made my decision. She took another step closer. The chill of the late autumn morning was somewhat dispelled by the all-or-nothing heat radiating from her. The lab is great, the project is meaningful, and the money is good, she said slowly, as if stating a fact about someone else. But every day I'd be staring at those cold instruments and data, and my mind would be on this broken-down courtyard, wondering where the man who once gave me a hot meal and the peace to study, and then ran away like a coward, was hiding, living out his so-called peaceful retirement. She quirked her lips in a self-deprecating smile. Sincere, you underestimated the interest your investment generated in me. It's not something that can be measured in money. It was like a seed that grew into a giant tree, its roots all tangled around my heart. If I don't dig it up and see it clearly, I can never truly move on. So you just quit your job and came here? I simply couldn't comprehend her logic. Victoria, you're destroying your future. Do you have any idea what you're doing? My future? Victoria suddenly laughed, a laugh tinged with mockery and a strange freedom. I'll define my own future. I used to climb so desperately to prove myself to you, to everyone who looked down on me. Now, I've proven enough. She spread her hands in a gesture of strange nonchalance. The prize money is more than enough for me to retire peacefully many times over. With the rest of my life, I want to try a different way of living. For example, right here, she pointed to the dirt at her feet, to figure some things out and to collect on some debts. Collect. I saw that glint of stubbornness and determination rekindle in her eyes, and the alarm bells in my head went wild. This woman was crazy. Absolutely insane. What she meant by take responsibility was clearly more than just the literal meaning. No, I refused flatly, slamming the plastic bucket on the ground. This humble temple can't house a goddess like you. The door is broken. I'll find someone to take you away. I turned to go back into the house, intending to grab my phone and make a call. Sincere Clark Victoria's voice rang out behind me, sharp and commanding. I stopped but didn't turn back. You try to kick me out. Her voice was quiet but drilled into my ears, and I dare to kick the door in a second time, and a third. You fix it, I'll break it. Or, her tone took on a sly, threatening edge, I could call Auntie Martha right now. Tell her I found you and that last night, well, you know. What do you think Auntie Martha would think? Would she get on the next bus over here? She's not getting any younger. What if on the way... Victoria. I whipped around, burning with anger. You're shameless, I learned from the best, Victoria said, crossing her arms and looking at me with an almost innocent smile. All's fair in love and war. Wasn't that the first lesson Professor Clark taught me? See your opportunity and strike decisively? I was choked, speechless. Looking at her face, which screamed, I'm here to stay, a profound sense of powerlessness washed over me. This woman was 100 times more difficult to deal with than Vivian. At least Vivian played by rules, made deals. Victoria, when she set her mind on something, she was utterly ruthless and relentless. What do you want? I asked through gritted teeth. Simple. Victoria held up one finger, her smile radiant. First, I'm staying for a while. As for the room, she looked around. That little room next to yours looks fine. A bit run down, but it'll do after a cleanup. That's my storage room, I protested. Which is why it needs cleaning, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Second, I need basic necessities. Clean sheets and blankets, a towel, a toothbrush. Oh, and most importantly, hot water. I need a shower. Now, immediately. She wrinkled her nose, sniffing her sleeve in disgust again, her tone bordering on a demanding tantrum. I'm about to suffocate from my own smell. Go boil some water. I looked at her, feeling like I was being roasted over a fire. I couldn't kick her out, couldn't win an argument, and she had me cornered with the Auntie Martha card. A huge sense of absurdity and the foreboding feeling of being dragged into a chaotic vortex pressed down on me. We stood in a standoff for a few seconds. Victoria just stood there, arms crossed, looking at me expectantly, her eyes clearly saying, go on, let's see who gives in first. Finally, I bent down in defeat, picked up the damn red plastic bucket, slammed it back on the ground in frustration, and then, without a word, stalked over to the firewood pile next to the kitchen. I started chopping wood, resigned. My movements were rough, sending wood chips flying. Victoria watched my furious wood chopping from behind, a sly, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She said nothing more, but turned and actually began to inspect the cluttered little room. It was filled with farm tools, old pieces of wood, and several dusty cardboard boxes. She frowned, carefully stepping around the dust, and started moving some obviously useless junk outside. And so, on that late autumn morning, a bizarre scene unfolded in the dilapidated courtyard in Riverbend Village. A chic urban professional in an expensive cashmere sweater and high heels was clumsily hauling junk out of a room, while on the other side of the yard, a disgruntled man in an old jacket was swinging an axe with gritted teeth, venting all his frustration on the innocent firewood. The thud of the axe chopping wood and the scraping sound of junk being dragged across the floor mingled together, shattering the village's morning peace. The chickens at Mrs. Dawson's next door seemed to be disturbed, letting out a series of anxious clucks. Life, now completely out of my control, was forcibly dragged onto a new track by Victoria. The small room that was once full of junk was, under Victoria's deft hands, or rather, her brute force, actually cleared out. She despised my squeaky old army cot and made a call to the county town. That same afternoon, a small truck bumped its way down the road, delivering a brand new ergonomic single mattress, a full set of bedding, and even a simple canvas wardrobe. The delivery boy looked at the run-down courtyard and the woman in the cashmere sweater directing him with an expression of utter disbelief. Even more absurd was the hot water situation. Victoria could not tolerate the primitive life of mixing water in a bucket for a daily shower. After inspecting the large wood-fired stove in the kitchen and the hand pump well in the yard, she thought for less than half a day before making another call. The next day, a small construction crew from the county town arrived. They built a small hot water basin in the corner of the kitchen, connected it with pipes to the large pot on the stove, and installed a hand-crank pressure pump to the wellhead. The principle was simple: boil a large pot of water, which would stay warm from the stove's residual heat. For a shower, you'd ladle the hot water into the basin and mix it with cold water pumped from the well. It was still rudimentary, but at least it was better than hauling buckets back and forth. Watching the workers, I stood in the yard, my temples throbbing. Money, this was all money, that bedding set, the wardrobe, this minor hot water renovation. The money she was spending was enough for me to live comfortably in this small town for years. "Victoria, can you not be so extravagant?" I tried to reason with her. "I don't need any of this, I do," Victoria replied without looking back, busy directing the workers on installing the pump handle. "Quality of life is a basic human right. Besides, it's my money. Why are you so concerned?" She finally turned to look at me, a mocking smile on her face. "Don't worry, I won't touch the $5 million you got from selling yourself." I was so choked with anger I could barely breathe. I turned on my heel and went to the vegetable patch to pull weeds, venting my frustration. The material upgrades were just the beginning. Victoria invaded every aspect of my life in the most domineering way possible. She claimed my cooking was fit only for pigs and took over the kitchen herself. Surprisingly, she was an excellent cook, quick and precise with her seasonings, but her standards for ingredients were incredibly high. The few small green shoots in my vegetable patch didn't even register with her. "Sincere, the vegetables in this patch are malnourished, their growth is stunted, and they'll taste terrible," she declared, hands on her hips like a general inspecting the fields, critiquing my hard work. "And the variety is too limited. Where are the tomatoes, the cucumbers, the lettuce? I want them all planted," and so my vegetable patch underwent an unprecedented species improvement and scientific cultivation. Victoria somehow procured a pile of seeds and seedlings, even a few bags of organic fertilizer, and printed out detailed planting schedules which she taped to the wall of my main room, specifying which day to water, which to fertilize, and when to set up trellises. She was like a strict foreman, inspecting the patch daily without fail. If she found me slacking off or not following her scientific standards, she would point it out without mercy. "Sincere, this row isn't tilled deep enough. The roots won't be able to spread too much water. It needs to be moist, not waterlogged, don't you understand? These seedlings are too close together. Pull 2 of them out." I held my hoe, watching her squat by the vegetable bed, poking the soil with her fair fingers, her face a picture of seriousness. I felt a sense of existential despair. The Dr. Stone who designed complex system architectures in a top-tier lab was now obsessed with directing me on how to plant vegetables. What I found even more unbearable was her schedule management. I was used to sleeping in, basking in the sun, and fishing, living life as I pleased. Victoria, however, was a human alarm clock and supervisor rolled into one. "Sincere, at 7, get up, the early bird gets the worm. Sincere, the sun is perfect at noon, take the blankets out to air. Sincere, stop lying around, come for a walk with me by the river. A body in motion stays in motion. Sincere, it's 10 o'clock, lights out, staying up late is bad for your liver." Her constant nagging gave me a splitting headache. I felt like a schoolboy being disciplined. Resistance? Futile. She would stare at you with her clear eyes, unblinking, presenting facts and reasoning from the human biological clock to the principles of healthy living until you surrendered. Or, even more effectively, she would take direct action, like ripping my blanket off when I was trying to sleep, the cold, late autumn air jolting me awake instantly. "Victoria, are you crazy?" I would clutch the blanket, my teeth chattering from the cold. "You're the one with a problem." "A healthy routine is the foundation of a long life," she would retort, hands on her hips, righteous and with a hint of mischievous triumph. Our wars were fought on all fronts. The layout of the vegetable patch, what to have for dinner, what time to go to bed, even whether to prune the old persimmon tree in the yard. Anything could trigger a dispute. She was logical, sharp-tongued, and unyielding. I was bombarded by her twisted logic and relentless action, often left fuming but helpless. The days passed in this chaotic, noisy fashion. The late autumn chill deepened, but the vegetable seedlings, under Victoria's scientific management, grew lush and vibrant, full of unseasonable life. On the surface, I was still resistant, still saw her as a colossal nuisance who had fallen from the sky. But deep down, something was quietly changing. For instance, when she wore one of my faded old shirts, sleeves rolled up, clumsily wielding a hoe, insisting on learning how to build a trellis for the tomatoes, and ended up with her hands covered in mud and a black smudge on her face, that clumsy yet earnest sight would make me stare, as if seeing the girl who had carefully wiped tables in the diner all those years ago. For instance, although she complained about my cooking, whenever I came back with a few small fish from the river, she would excitedly figure out the best way to cook them, and the fish soup she served would be exquisitely delicious. While drinking the soup, she would narrow her eyes like a contented cat and occasionally mutter a compliment, the fish is fresh. And for instance, sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night for a drink of water and see the light on in her small room. Pushing the door open, I'd find her curled up in her new blankets, a laptop on her lap, the screen flickering with complex diagrams and code. Her brow would be furrowed in deep concentration, completely immersed in another world. At that moment, the bossy, unreasonable Victoria of the daytime would disappear, leaving only the focused, intellectually radiant Dr. Stone. I would quietly back out, leaving a small nightlight on for her. This contradictory feeling grew stronger. The annoyance was real, like a still pond being violently disturbed by a vibrant, reckless stone. But my stagnant life also seemed to have been stirred into motion by this stone's arrival. A long-lost feeling of being alive, filled with the messy reality of daily life, was quietly growing amidst the chaos. I deliberately ignored this feeling, continuing to bicker with her every day, trying to annoy her into leaving. Until that afternoon. The sky was overcast, a fine cold rain falling. It was the perfect weather for napping. I was wrapped in my blanket, fast asleep. In a daze, I felt someone shaking me. "Sincere, wake up, wake up." It was Victoria's voice, sharp and urgent. I rolled over impatiently, pulling the blanket over my head. "Don't bother me. It's raining. Perfect for sleeping." "Sleeping? This is no time for sleep. There's been an accident." Victoria's voice grew louder, and with undeniable force, she ripped the blanket off me. The cold air hit me, and I was instantly awake. I sat up, furious. "Victoria, what's wrong with you now?" "Look." Victoria ignored my anger and shoved her phone in my face. The screen showed a push notification from a local news app. The headline was alarming. "Breaking major landslide on the mountain road connecting Greendale County to the city. Multiple vehicles buried, traffic completely cut off, rescue operations underway." My heart sank, all sleepiness gone. There were only 2 roads out of Greendale County, a longer, safer provincial highway, and this shorter but treacherous mountain road. The car Victoria had rented was parked at the village entrance. She had been talking about going to the city to buy some things just a couple of days ago. "Your car," I blurted out, my voice tight. "The car is fine, it's at the village entrance," Victoria said quickly, her finger swiping across the screen to open the news article, her face grim. "But look at the time. The landslide happened around 2 p.m. Auntie Martha took the bus to the city this afternoon to see her daughter. She takes the bus that runs on that route. Auntie Martha." The name was like a bolt of lightning, shattering my stupor. After my parents died, it was Mrs. Shaw, this uneducated but kind woman who had taken me in with her simple warmth, helped me run the diner, and gave me a place to stay when I was most lost. She was like family to both me and Victoria. The horrific images in the news and the rising casualty numbers were like ice water poured over me. Fear seized my heart. Her phone call, Auntie Martha's phone. My voice was strained, and my hands fumbled for my own phone, my fingers trembling. "I already tried, it's off, it keeps going straight to voicemail." Victoria's voice also held a faint tremor. She had obviously seen the news before me, and had already tried to make contact. "Call her daughter, quick." I forced myself to calm down, quickly scrolling through my contacts to find her daughter Lena's number, and dialed. The long, agonizing rings echoed in my tense nerves. "Hello? Sincere?" The call finally connected. Lena's voice was thick with tears and panic. "Lena, where's Auntie Martha?" "The bus she was on," I asked urgently. I can't reach her at all. The passenger list isn't out yet. The rescue team said the scene is too chaotic. Mom, her phone is off." Lena was sobbing uncontrollably on the other end. "Sincere, I'm so scared. What do I do?" "Don't panic, Lena, don't panic." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. We're on our way, you stay home, don't go anywhere, let us know immediately if you hear anything. I hung up and looked at Victoria. We saw the same heavy anxiety in each other's eyes. Outside, the cold rain fell. The situation on the mountain road was unknown, and it was dangerous. But Mrs. Shaw was there. I'll drive, Victoria didn't hesitate for a second, turning to rush out, not even bothering to change out of her slippers. Wait, I grabbed her arm. It's raining hard and the road is slippery. The mountain road is definitely more dangerous. Now I'll go, you stay here and wait for news. Mrs. Shaw had been kind to me. I couldn't let Victoria risk her life. You'll go? Victoria yanked her hand away and glared at me, her eyes as sharp as knives. Can you even drive? Do you have a license? Do you know the safest way to navigate a mountain road? Are you going to be a help or a hindrance right now? Her rapid-fire questions pinned me to the spot. It was true. I didn't even have a driver's license. I had always taken taxis or trains, never thinking I'd need to drive myself. I know the roads better than you. I have experience. Victoria's tone was firm and decisive. You stay here, keep the line open, be ready to take Lena's call and get hot water, towels, and blankets ready in case Auntie Martha is rescued and needs them. She didn't finish, but we both knew what that in case meant. Victoria, I looked at her slim but straight back in the cold rain, a mix of emotions churning inside me. At this moment, the domineering, unreasonable Victoria was gone, replaced by a calm, decisive, and loyal woman. Stop wasting time, every second counts. Victoria rushed into the rain without looking back, running toward the black SUV she had rented, parked at the village entrance. The rain instantly soaked her hair and shoulders. I stood under the eaves, watching her swiftly open the car door, get in, and start the engine. The headlights cut a beam of light through the gray, rainy haze. The engine roared, and the car shot forward without hesitation, splashing mud and water, quickly disappearing around the bend of the muddy village road. The cold rain hit my face. The yard was suddenly empty, filled only with the sound of the falling rain. The once chaotic, lively courtyard was now desolate and cold. An unprecedented panic and concern gripped my heart, not just for the possibly endangered Mrs. Shaw, but also for the figure who had just plunged headfirst into the dangerous storm. I spun around and rushed back into the house, clumsily starting to boil water, searching for clean towels and blankets. My movements were awkward from anxiety. My mind was a mess, filled with the image of Victoria's resolute back as she ran into the rain, and Mrs. Shaw's kind, smiling face. Time ticked by, each second an eternity. The phone on the table was as silent as a stone. I paced back and forth in the main room, my eyes glued to the small road leading to the village entrance, hoping to see the beam of headlights pierce the rain at any moment. The rain grew heavier, and the sky darker. Anxiety coiled around me like a vine, tightening its grip. I began to regret not stopping her more forcefully. That mountain road, the heavy rain, the landslide, any one of those things could be fatal. Just as I was about to be consumed by anxiety, the phone screen finally lit up. It was Victoria's number. I practically lunged for the phone, my finger trembling as I swiped to answer. Hello, Victoria, what's going on? Victoria's voice came through, tired and damp with rain, but steady. I found her. I found Auntie Martha. The heart that had been in my throat dropped halfway back into my chest. The immense relief almost made me buckle. How is she? Is she hurt? She's okay, minor injuries, just terrified. Victoria's voice was also tinged with relief and lingering fear. The bus she was on was pushed into a ditch by the mudslide. The doors were jammed, and she was trapped inside. The rescue team just got her out. She has some scrapes on her arm and a sprained ankle, and she's badly shaken. But she's conscious. We're in an ambulance on the way to the county hospital. Now, thank God. Thank God, I murmured, leaning against the table to steady myself. I felt completely drained, left with only the exhaustion of post-crisis relief. Do you have everything ready? Victoria asked. Yes, hot water, towels, blankets, everything good. We should be at the county hospital emergency room in about half an hour. Meet us there. Victoria gave her instructions crisply, then seemed to turn and say something to someone else, before hanging up abruptly. Listening to the dial tone, I stood stunned for a few seconds, then sprang into action as if wound up. I filled a thermos with boiling water, grabbed the clean towels and thick blankets, locked the still crooked gate, and rushed into the rain, my feet sinking into the mud as I ran to the village entrance. I got lucky and managed to flag down a three-wheeler heading to the county town to deliver goods. I paid the driver double to get me to the hospital as fast as possible. Sitting in the bumpy back of the vehicle, cold wind and rain blew in. I hugged the thermos and blankets, watching the rain-streaked, blurry fields fly by outside the window, my mind in turmoil. The agony of the past hour had been a nightmare. And Victoria, the Victoria who had, in a moment of crisis, unhesitatingly rushed into danger, calmly found the person she was looking for, and arranged everything. Her image for the first time was so clear, so powerful, shattering all my previous labels for her troublemaker, unreasonable, crazy. She wasn't crazy, she just knew what she wanted more than anyone else, and at critical moments possessed an extraordinary courage and sense of responsibility. When I arrived at the county hospital's emergency room, it was a scene of chaos. I immediately spotted Victoria sitting on a bench in the hallway. She was soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her pale face, her expensive cashmere sweater and pants covered in mud. She was wearing only one slipper. Her other foot was bare on the cold floor. She was bent over, carefully wiping the mud from Mrs. Shaw's face and hands with a relatively clean towel. Mrs. Shaw was leaning against her, pale and dazed, her arm wrapped in bandages, her ankle swollen. When she saw me, tears welled up in her eyes, and her lips trembled. Sincere, "Vicky, Auntie Martha, it's okay, you're safe now." I rushed over, put down the thermos and blankets, wrapped the thick blanket tightly around her, and poured her a cup of hot water. "Drink this, warm up. It's all thanks to Vicky." Mrs. Shaw clutched the cup, tears streaming down her face. If it wasn't for her, in such a dangerous place, she just ran over shouting my name. I looked at Victoria. She looked up, her face etched with exhaustion, her eyes red from the rain and stress, but they were bright. She gave me a weak smile, said nothing, and went back to carefully wiping the dried mud from Mrs. Shaw's hair. Her movements were gentle and focused. At that moment, the smell of disinfectant in the hallway, the surrounding noise, all seemed to fade away. All that was left was this soaked, disheveled, yet bright-eyed woman before me. An indescribable warmth surged through my chest, with a delayed but powerful impact. Just then, the sharp click of high heels on the floor echoed from the ER entrance, accompanied by a cold, angry female voice that shattered the brief moment of peace like a shard of ice. "Sincere Clark, I knew I'd find you here." The voice, like a blade dipped in ice, was sharp and cold, filled with a barely suppressed rage that cut through the ER hallway's mix of disinfectant, wet mud, and anxiety. I shot my head up, looking toward the sound. The glass doors of the emergency room had been shoved open violently, slamming against the wall with a dull thud. Vivian Blackwood stood there, dressed in a flawlessly tailored black cashmere coat that made her skin look even colder and paler. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, revealing a smooth forehead and eyes that now burned with an icy fire. Her face showed the fatigue of a long journey, but it was overshadowed by a stormy gloom and an incredulous fury. Those eyes, which had once coolly dominated boardrooms, were now locked onto me, so sharp they could have carved holes in my skin. What was she doing here? How did she find this place? Greendale County Hospital ER at this time. A massive wave of shock seized me like a cold hand clamping around my throat. The hand holding the blanket froze mid-air. I was completely stunned. Vivian's gaze lingered on my face for a full 3 seconds, the cold scrutiny in her eyes almost freezing me solid. Then her gaze slowly shifted. It swept over Mrs. Shaw, who was wrapped in a blanket, still shaken and sobbing beside me. Finally, it landed next to me on Victoria, who was soaked, covered in mud, barefoot, and wiping Mrs. Shaw's hair with a towel. Victoria had also heard the commotion and looked up. Her face was still weary and worried, but the moment she saw it was Vivian, her bloodshot eyes instantly filled with a cold, undisguised vigilance and hostility. She didn't move, still half squatting, but her fingers holding the towel tightened slightly. The two women's gazes collided in mid-air. There was no sound, but it was as if invisible sparks were flying. On one side was the exquisitely dressed, cold urban elite. On the other, the disheveled but sharp-eyed, stubborn, beleaguered PhD. The contrast was too stark, too bizarre. Even the busy hospital staff and other patients slowed down, casting curious glances their way. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin, pale line. She looked at Victoria's state, at the natural, close proximity between us. at her bare foot on the dirty floor. The fire in Vivian's eyes blazed higher, mixed with extreme disgust and a sense of being offended. She walked toward us, her expensive pointed toe heels clicking sharply on the terrazzo floor, a menacing tap-tap sound like a war drum. She stopped 2 steps away, looking down at us. Her gaze returned to my face, her voice so cold it could freeze water. "Sincere Clark, you've really outdone yourself." Her voice was low but seethed with a chilling rage. "I wondered why you left so readily." "So, you had already found your next meal ticket, hiding in this backwater town, playing this hero saving the damsel melodrama." Her gaze swept contemptuously over Victoria's muddy clothes and bare foot, a mocking sneer on her lips. "Quite a unique taste you've developed. Gave up a good life for this country bumpkin flavor? What, was serving one rich woman not enough? You wanted to raise a hick too?" Vivian, the blood rushed to my head. I cut her off, my voice sharp. "Watch your mouth, this isn't the place for you to make a scene. I'm making a scene." Vivian laughed as if she'd heard the world's greatest joke, her voice suddenly rising, drawing more attention. "Sincere, you took my money and ran back here to fool around with this kind of woman, and you have the nerve to tell me I'm making a scene?" She pointed a finger at Victoria, almost poking her in the nose. "Who is she, huh? When did you two get together? Was it while you were still with my company? Is that why you agreed to the divorce so easily? Tell me her accusations were absurd and vicious, like filth being thrown at us." I was trembling with anger, about to retort, when a calm but icy voice spoke first. "Ma'am." It was Victoria. She had stood up at some point. Despite being soaked and disheveled, barefoot and perhaps slightly shorter than Vivian in her heels, her back was ramrod straight, her chin slightly lifted. She didn't look at Vivian, but her gaze was on me. Her tone was as calm as if she were stating a simple fact, yet it carried an invisible, powerful presence that instantly overshadowed Vivian's hysteria. "Is this the ex-wife? The one who, after her business failed, and you found her destitute, you invested your entire life savings to save? And who, after becoming successful, got busy with her little secretary and then sent you packing with $5 million like you were a beggar? The esteemed Miss Blackwood?" Victoria's voice was clear, steady. Each word a cold stone dropped precisely into the water. She even tilted her head slightly, her expression one of perfectly feigned curiosity. There was a boom in the air around me. The color drained from Vivian's face. The mask of cold arrogance she always wore cracked for the first time, visibly and shockingly. Her eyes widened, her pupils contracted, as if she had been brutally stripped bare of all her defenses in the most humiliating way possible, exposed for all to see. Her lips trembled, the finger pointing at Victoria shook, but she couldn't utter a single word. The surrounding gazes grew more complex, filled with speculation and whispers, but Victoria acted as if she hadn't noticed Vivian's breakdown. Her gaze finally, slowly, turned to Vivian. Her clear, sharp eyes looked her up and down, and a faint yet devastatingly effective smile played on her lips. "It seems so." Victoria nodded slightly, her tone still calm, even tinged with a dawning realization. "Indeed, clothes make the woman. Dressed in a $10,000 coat and limited edition heels, you certainly look much more presentable than when you couldn't even afford a bowl of noodles at a street stall." That sentence was the last straw. What nonsense are you spouting?" Vivian finally found her voice, so shrill it almost cracked, filled with a flustered, humiliated rage. "Sincere, you told her, didn't you? You actually told this kind of woman about that? Have you no shame? Why so agitated, Miss Blackwood?" Victoria chuckled, her laugh laced with undisguised mockery. "If you don't want people to know, don't do it in the first place. You did it, so why are you afraid of people talking about it?" She took a small step forward. Her bare foot on the cold floor seemed to be standing on some invisible high ground. Her gaze became intensely pressuring, locked onto Vivian, who was pale and breathing heavily. "And also, a few corrections." Victoria's voice turned cold. "First, my relationship with Sincere is none of your business. You who bought out your relationship with money and then went back on your word. Second, he's not using your money to support me. To be precise," she paused, her gaze sweeping over me with a declarative air. "From now on, it's me who's supporting him." She looked back at Vivian, her eyes holding a condescending pity and merciless sarcasm. "After all, being double-crossed by the boy toy you were keeping, having him run off with company secrets and client lists, leaving you with nothing. That must be tough, right, Miss Blackwood? Is that why you're so hysterical, running here like a stray dog that's lost its home, to bark at your ex-husband? Every word from Victoria was like the sharpest dagger, precisely stabbing Vivian's most painful, most shameful wounds. The secretary running off with the money, the company in crisis, all the humiliation and failure she had hidden, swallowing her pride, was now being aired out so clearly, so viciously, by this woman who had appeared out of nowhere. Vivian's body swayed violently. Her face was so ashen she looked like she might faint. She stared at Victoria, her eyes filled with venom and horror, her lips moving but unable to form any effective counterattack. The gazes of the onlookers were now like needles piercing her skin. She finally whipped her head around and gave me one last venomous glare, an expression so complex: anger, resentment, disbelief, and a hint of shame and regret that she herself wouldn't want to admit. Then, she spun around and practically ran, her high heels stumbling, and fled from the emergency room, disappearing into the cold rain and darkness outside the hospital. Like a defeated rooster, she scurried away. An eerie silence fell over the hallway, broken only by the beeping of medical equipment and the sound of the rain outside. I stood there, my heart still pounding, my palms slick with cold sweat. Watching the direction Vivian had disappeared, I felt a complex mix of emotions: humiliation, vindication, absurdity, and a vague sense of melancholy. 2 years of marriage, ending in such a farcical, ugly confrontation. Ahem. Mrs. Shaw coughed weakly, breaking the silence. She was clearly shaken by the scene, looking at me and Victoria with concern. I snapped back to reality, took a deep breath to calm my roiling emotions, and knelt to comfort Mrs. Shaw again. "Auntie Martha, it's over, it's okay, don't be scared." Victoria also knelt, picking up the towel and continuing where she left off, carefully wiping the back of Mrs. Shaw's hand. Her profile, under the harsh fluorescent lights, was calm, as if the sharp-tongued woman who had just verbally annihilated Vivian wasn't her. But just for a fleeting moment, as she looked down, I thought I saw the corner of her mouth twitch into a tiny smile. So quick it could have been my imagination, but it held the sly, possessive satisfaction of a small animal that had successfully guarded its territory. A nurse arrived with a gurney to take Mrs. Shaw for further examination. Victoria and I helped her onto it. As we followed the gurney toward the examination room, I walked beside Victoria. The hallway lights were dim, and her silhouette looked frail, her wet hair clinging to her cheeks. I hesitated, then spoke in a low, raspy voice. "How did you know her company was in trouble?" "And about the secretary?" Victoria didn't turn her head, her gaze fixed on the gurney ahead. Her tone was as flat as if she were discussing the weather. "Oh, I did some research before I came. News about her company has been circulating in certain circles. As for the secretary," she finally turned to glance at me, her expression saying, "Do you even need to ask? What other reason could there be for him to let you walk away with that much money, other than her cheating on him so blatantly?" I was speechless. She looked away and added coolly, with a tone of utter disdain, "She has terrible taste." I was speechless again. Looking at her calm profile, the complex emotions in my heart were suddenly replaced by a sense of absurdity and helplessness. This woman, how many other things had she looked into that I didn't know about? The test results came back quickly. Mrs. Shaw had only sustained minor injuries and was suffering from shock. She needed to be observed overnight. After handling the admission paperwork and settling her in, it was already late at night by the time she had eaten a little and fallen asleep. The rain had stopped at some point. The hospital hallway quieted down, with only the soft footsteps of the night nurse. Victoria and I walked out of the inpatient building together. A cold night wind hit us, carrying the fresh, chilly scent of post-rain air. Victoria instinctively hugged her arms. Her soaked cashmere sweater was no match for the cold. I took off my own relatively dry old jacket and handed it to her. Victoria paused, looked at the jacket, then at me. "Put it on, don't get sick." My tone was a bit stiff, awkward. "I'm not going to take care of you if you do." Victoria looked at me for a few seconds, then silently took the jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The large jacket enveloped her, carrying my body heat and the faint smell of tobacco. She tucked her chin into the collar. We walked in silence through the empty hospital courtyard toward the exit where her car was parked. The streetlights cast two long, occasionally overlapping shadows on the ground. "Today." "Thank you," I said, my voice low and hoarse, my eyes on the rain-washed pavement ahead. Thank you for risking yourself to find Mrs. Shaw, and thank you for defending me, even if the way she did it was shockingly intense. Victoria's steps faltered for a moment, then she continued walking. After a while, she let out a soft M&M in response. Her voice was muffled by the wind. When we reached the car, she unlocked it. As she opened the driver's side door, she suddenly turned to face me. The streetlight cast shifting shadows on her face, but her eyes were incredibly bright. "Sincere Clark," she said my name with unprecedented seriousness. "Yeah? She was never good enough for you," Victoria said, looking straight into my eyes, her words clear and precise. "Not then, and especially not now." I was stunned, looking at her incredibly earnest expression, feeling something gently nudge my heart. "So," she paused, her chin lifting with that familiar, unquestionable dominance. "From now on, you answer to me." Without waiting for my reaction, she ducked into the driver's seat and shut the door with a thud. The engine started. The headlights came on, illuminating the wet road ahead. She rolled down the window, leaned out, her face reverting to that sly, commanding expression. "What are you standing there for? Get in, let's go home, it's freezing." I stood there, looking at the woman in the car wearing my old jacket, her hair still a mess but her eyes bright, brazenly declaring that I was now her responsibility. The night wind was cold, but a strange, surging warmth spread through me, as if something had seared my heart. On impulse, without arguing, without hesitating, I pulled open the passenger door and got in. The car pulled smoothly out of the hospital and onto the quiet county road. The heater was on full blast, mixing with the dampness from her clothes and the smell of my old jacket. Victoria drove with concentration, her profile softened by the faint light of the dashboard. Outside was the deep post-rain darkness, but the car's headlights stubbornly cut through it, lighting the way home. I knew that some things, starting tonight, or maybe starting from the moment she kicked down my door, had changed completely. Vivian's drama might be over, but mine and Victoria's had clearly just begun, and it seemed the control was no longer in my hands. I leaned back against the seat and closed my eyes. Exhaustion washed over me like a tide. But this time, deep within the fatigue, there was no longer a dead emptiness, but a strange, almost resigned sense of peace. Whatever. So be it. Outside the car window, the wind rustled through the fields, carrying the faint sound of a distant dog barking. Time flowed like the water in the river behind the village, seemingly gentle, but covering a great distance before you even realized it. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. Riverbend Village didn't seem to have changed much. The same low tile-roofed houses, winding dirt roads, and fields that changed with the seasons. But in other ways, it had changed a lot. The village now had a more stable broadband connection. Many families had built 2-story houses, and while the young people still mostly worked in the cities, the elderly and children who remained seemed to have a more content look on their faces. The biggest change, of course, was the courtyard at the east end of the village, Sincere Clark's place. The old wooden gate that Victoria had kicked down was long gone, replaced by a pair of sturdy yet rustic-style iron gates. Victoria herself had drawn the design and had a local craftsman make them. A small wooden plaque hung on the gate, with 2 slightly clumsy characters carved into it, Clark Residence. Rumor had it that it was the masterpiece of a certain little fellow. The dirt yard had been paved with flagstones. Along one wall, the vegetable patch that Victoria had once strictly scientifically managed had been expanded. Tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, and lettuce grew vigorously, and there were even 2 rows of strawberries. Next to it was a new grape arbor, its leaves lush in the summer, laden with clusters of green or purple fruit. Beneath it, a stone table and stools offered a cool resting spot. The other side of the yard had been turned into a small flower garden, with roses, hydrangeas, and a few other unidentifiable flowers blooming vibrantly in the sun. The old hand-pump well was still there, polished to a shine, with a vintage-style brass basin Victoria had bought placed beside it. The 3 old tile-roofed houses had also been completely transformed. The roof had new tiles, the walls were repainted, and the windows were replaced with double-glazed aluminum ones, bright and warm. The interior had wooden floors, running water, modern kitchen and bathroom fixtures, and even a small study partitioned off in a corner of the main room. Inside, 2 top-of-the-line computers sat side by side, one for Victoria's occasional urgent work or remote academic conferences, the other for Sincere to play games and check stock prices. It was now afternoon. The early summer sun filtered through the grape leaves, dappling the flagstones with light. A pot of freshly brewed jasmine tea sat on the stone table, steam curling from two white porcelain cups. Victoria, dressed in comfortable cotton and linen loungewear, her hair casually tied in a bun, was sitting on a stone stool. A slim laptop was in front of her, the screen displaying a complex molecular structure. She would frown in thought, then tap a few keys, completely absorbed in her academic world. The sunlight outlined her focused profile, which had lost some of its youthful sharpness and gained a gentle glow of motherhood, but her stubborn determination remained unchanged. Sincere was sprawled in a nearby wicker lounge chair, wearing a matching old t-shirt and shorts, and flip-flops. He held a tablet, but the screen was dark. His eyes were half closed as he enjoyed the lazy afternoon sun and the cool breeze, on the verge of falling asleep. This kind of idle leisure was his ultimate life goal. However, this tranquility was soon shattered. At a smaller stone table under the grape arbor, a round-headed little sprout in a tank top and shorts was frowning at his homework. His little brow was furrowed, his chubby fingers clutching a pencil, poking at the notebook and making whimpering sounds. Sigh. The little sprout let out a long sigh, his voice milky yet filled with a sorrow that didn't match his age. "This letter is so hard to write." No one paid him any attention. The little guy secretly glanced at his work-absorbed mother, then at his nearly asleep father. His lower lip protruded even more. He put down his pencil and started playing with his eraser, rubbing crumbs everywhere. Ahem, he cleared his throat loudly on purpose. Victoria's train of thought was broken. She looked up, annoyed, her gaze shooting over the top of her glasses with the scrutiny of a researcher looking at a failed experiment. "Max Clark, have you finished your phonics? What are you playing with?" The little guy, Max, immediately sat up straight and pretended to pick up his pencil. I'm writing. It's just, this G, it keeps falling over." Victoria put down her computer, stood up, and walked over to look at her son's notebook. One glance was all it took for her brow to furrow into a knot. On the page, the letter G was crooked, like a drunk worm, and it was completely outside the lines, almost crawling into the row above. Max Clark Victoria's voice instantly rose, filled with a stern, exasperated tone. "Where are your eyes? Can't you see the grid? The belly of the G should be round and stay in the middle box. Its tail should sit firmly in the bottom box. What is this? A bean sprout blown over by the wind?" Max shrank back from his mother's yelling and mumbled, It won't listen to me. It won't listen. The pencil is in your hand. Are you controlling it, or is it controlling you?" Victoria snatched the pencil and wrote 3 perfect standard GS in a blank space. "See? Copy this if you can't write it properly. No ice cream for you this afternoon." Max looked at his mother's print, like handwriting, his face falling even further. He picked up his eraser and started erasing, muttering, "Mommy's G is too fat. Mine is slimmer." Victoria glared at him, exasperated but helpless against her little trickster. I was fully woken by the commotion. I yawned and strolled over to watch the show. I glanced at my son's atrocious writing and couldn't help but tisk. "I say, Victoria." I leaned against the stone table, my tone gloating. "You're a genius scientist with an IQ of 160. Did your genetic factory settings miss a parameter? How come your son can't even write a simple letter without it looking like chicken scratch?" Victoria immediately turned her fire on me. "Sincere Clark, you have the nerve to talk. Are your genes not responsible? All you do all day is lie around like a corpse. Have you ever cared about your son's studies? All you do is make sarcastic comments." I shrugged, unconcerned. I'm providing him with a negative example, showing him that if he doesn't study hard, he'll end up like his dad, farming and sunbathing. I picked up Max's notebook, pointed at the crooked G, and spouted nonsense with a straight face. "But son, this G of yours, it's very creative, abstract, postmodern, clearly the work of a genius, much more artistic than the assembly line standard your mom produces." Max giggled, having found an ally, and nodded vigorously. "Yes, our daddy gets it." Victoria snatched the notebook back, glaring at me. "Sincere, if you cause any more trouble, go pull the weeds in the backyard." I immediately surrendered. All right, I'll shut up. You continue, Professor Stone." I winked at my son and collapsed back into my lounge chair to continue watching the show. Victoria took a deep breath, trying to suppress her anger. She picked up the pencil again and tried to speak to her son in a gentle voice. "Max, come on, Mommy will show you again. Look, the curve goes like this." Max blinked his big eyes, looking as if he half understood. After 3 more attempts, the little guy's G stubbornly maintained its artistic style. Victoria's patience finally ran out. She slammed the pencil on the table and asked the ultimate question. "Max Clark, tell me, who did you get your brain from?" "Huh?" My son and I, from the lounge chair, pointed at each other without hesitation and said in perfect unison, from him, her, the voices were firm, perfectly in sync. Max looked at his furious mother, then at his innocent-looking pretending father. His little lip quivered and he burst into tears. "Wah! I was picked up from the trash can. Victoria, me." Well, that stirred up a hornet's nest. Victoria scrambled to comfort her son, wiping his tears and promising him his ice cream was safe. I guiltily rubbed my nose and looked up at the sky. The sun was bright. The grape leaves were green, and the flowers in the yard smelled sweet. It was chaotic, but it was home. Victoria finally managed to calm down her crying son, settling him back on the stool with a slew of unequal treaties, including, but not limited to, double ice cream and an extra half-hour of cartoons. The little guy, sniffling, picked up his pencil again to launch another assault on his homework. She walked back to her seat, took a sip of the now lukewarm jasmine tea, and let out a long sigh, as if she had just fought a tough battle. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead. I had walked over at some point and was now fanning her with a palm leaf fan. Victoria glanced at me, said nothing, and enjoyed the momentary coolness before turning her attention back to the molecular formula on her computer screen. Her brow was slightly furrowed. She seemed to have hit a snag. I followed her gaze. The tangled lines and symbols on the screen were gibberish to me. "Stuck again?" I asked casually. Victoria replied vaguely, her fingers tapping unconsciously on the table. "There's an energy calculation that's not adding up. I've built the model 3 times. I was silent for a moment, looking at her focused, troubled profile. Then I spoke, my tone as casual as if I were asking about dinner. "Do you want me to open up another level of Deep Blue's computing power for you? They just upgraded their server array recently." Victoria's tapping fingers froze. She snapped her head up, her eyes sharp behind her glasses, looking at me with suspicion and disbelief. "Deep Blue? How do you have access to Deep Blue's computing power? That's the National Supercomputing Center." I looked away, continuing to fan her slowly, my voice still nonchalant. "Oh, it's nothing. I had some spare time and pocket money years ago, so I invested a little. Got a few points of technical dividend shares. I have an emergency contact channel with their board's secretarial office." I paused and added, "An anonymous one." Victoria's mouth opened as if to say something, but no words came out. She just looked at me with an incredibly complex expression, shock, realization, and I knew it, look, and a hint of exasperation. In the end, she didn't ask anything else. She just gave me a long, deep look, then turned back to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Her voice was back to its usual calm efficiency, but with a faint, almost imperceptible hint of gritted teeth. "Email me the access code and the verification method for the anonymous channel." "Okay," I replied, pulling out my phone and slowly starting the process. The yard fell quiet again, filled only with the sound of keyboard clicks, the swish of the fan, and the grunts of a certain little fellow continuing his battle with phonics. The sun was warm. The days were long. I rocked the fan, looking at the woman beside me, her brow furrowed in concentration, and at my son on the other side, scratching his head over his homework. The once barren wasteland in my heart was now completely filled with this noisy, warm, trivial, everyday life. Fatten up a rich woman and then run. Who could understand this kind of happiness? I guess it's... After running in circles, you realize that the richest, most troublesome, and also the one you can't bring yourself to leave, had already kicked down your door, barged in, and righteously declared, "From now on, you answer to me." Oh well, so be it. I shifted into a more comfortable position in my chair, closed my eyes, and felt the gentle, intoxicating breeze of the early summer afternoon. This was my life now, and that was that.